welcome back. So we are at the very end of our project. We've created a bunch of designs. We've created a bunch of components. We understand different things like color theory. We understand a bunch of things like typography, and we're at the end, and you're probably wondering, what do we do with all this? How do we put it together? How do we showcase some of our designs and some of our interactions we've been thinking about? How do we incorporate things like motion, animation? And this is where the fun stuff really happens. If the other stuff wasn't fun to you, this is really, really fun stuff. So what we have here are our high fidelity prototypes. So I've kind of grouped them into the same file where we have our actual high fidelity designs. And over here, we can really start to experiment with certain types of interactions. As you can tell, I don't just have one large prototype. I actually advocate against that, unless you're just trying to showcase some the navigation tree. But if you're trying to get into the little different types of elements, you may want to actually create a separate prototype for that. So what I have here is I have our onboarding section. Now I want to showcase what it's like to get from the main onboarding screen to sign up or not signing up. In this case, the user's not going to actually sign up. So let's go ahead and play this. But before we actually do that, I want to click the prototype tab. And as you can tell, I have everything set up here. I have a different type of phone model. I have the background color set to whatever I want. I have my starting frame, which is at the splash screen prompt. Looks like we're good to go. So if I select this, you can see that if a user presses this CTA, they're going to go to this page, and this is the interaction I have. Now I have on tap. It will navigate to the next onboarding screen. It will push this onboarding screen out, but it will smart animate those layers. And what that means is, if you were paying attention in our last course around prototyping and motion and animation, smart animating the matching layers will actually keep the layers that are named the same in the same frame, and it'll just animate them to a new spot, depending on different types of properties. It could be position, it could be color, it could be size, it could be rotation. There's so many different properties that are covered by Smart Animate. So let's take a look. So we have that pumping in here. I've also set up a couple of different interactions here where it's very similar. We have that push animation all at the same time, the type of animations I can ease out. But I also have on the actual entire frame, I have a drag interaction. So if users just want to kind of swipe through, they would get the same interaction from clicking next, but it would actually just be like a drag animation. And then if we take a look at the top, we have a skip button, and that skip button is going to lead all the way to the very end. And I want to keep this at the very top. I don't want users to skip through this onboarding. I want them to get a good understanding of, what is this application all about. So one thing I want to just showcase before we actually run this prototype that I forgot about. So you can tell text is staying the same. So we'll see slight animation there in terms of how the text changes. These animations are definitely different. So I have this one named illustration 1. I have this one, illustration 2, and so on and so forth. These circles are actually all named main circle. So bring that up. So you'll see if I click one circle, it's going to be reflected in every frame. It's going to show me straight up what I'm dealing with, where it's repeated, and how it possibly may animate. Same with these carousel little buttons over here. So I have the carousel set up, text, and I have our buttons. Okay, so let's run this prototype. What we're going to do is we're going to click play. It's going to pop up in a nice window over here. And if we press R, we'll restart it. So if I click on my prototype, I can see which button I'm going to click, and I'm going to do that. So we'll see. That was a nice little animation. We had that main circle come in. Everything slides in nice and slow. If I want to kind of swipe, we can start seeing a little bit of swiping animation. We can see how the actual carousel starts to work. So I'm going to click next. Boom. We're on our second page. Irrelevant result again. Boom. And then the last one. Perfect. So at this point, we're at the very end of our onboarding screen, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to click. So we had a little issue there. We'll see. Ask me again later. You notice how there's a little funky background change? Now this is what we're going to do here. At this point, if I click ask me again later, I don't want to smart animate at all. So let's see if that fixes it. Yes, it does. So it just moves in over and we're at the home screen. Now, we don't need to worry about things like logging in at this point. Users can log in if they click that. But we have easy ways to get back. So as you can tell, I've also set animation to go back and forth if the user wants to do that. But this is how we've handled our onboarding. It's really exciting stuff. I love that. I love the little animations there. And then we can kind of go through our containers. We'll kind of put a swipe container over here. Same with our deals section. Then we just have our standard things like our shopping and habits and interests. So these are the kind of the components that we've used. Now, if we go back to our screen, you can tell that sometimes when you're creating prototypes, your components may not actually work really well because if you're trying to smart animate certain things, you're going to need to possibly break those down a little bit more. I've done that a bit through some of the prototypes I've created. Like, I get some carousel dots. They're not a component yet, but I may actually create a component for them. When I'm using them in this instance, I probably won't actually use the component version. So you have to think about those little things because, sometimes if we take a look at our primary default component, if there are certain things changing within, you see how deep this goes, and with it needing to match certain naming conventions and stuff like that. You may have two primary button defaults on the same screen and you may need to rename them and, things get a little bit complex in that regard. So that is what we've done for onboarding prototype.